Hello, TikTok. Today I would like to tell you about one of my favorite arguments for the existence of God, the fine-tuning argument. The fine-tuning is a fact of science that says that the laws and constants of physics have to fall within a very extremely narrow range in order to permit the existence of life. If even one of these factors were off by even a little bit, life would not be able to exist in the universe. For example, the strong nuclear force is the force of physics which binds together protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. If the strong nuclear force were slightly weaker, then it would not be strong enough to bind together protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. As a result, the only type of matter that would exist in the universe is the hydrogen atom, because hydrogen has only one proton and no other protons and neutrons in its nucleus. It is the simplest atom that there is. Life cannot evolve from a universe consisting 100% of hydrogen. But if the strong nuclear force were slightly stronger than what it is, then protons and neutrons would stick together so efficiently that no proton would exist alone. There would be no hydrogen atoms at all. And it's finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 30th power, 1 in a nonillion. The second one I want to talk about is the weak nuclear force. This force is responsible for the radioactive decay of subatomic particles, and it plays an essential role in nuclear fission. If this force were any stronger, matter would convert into heavy elements at too rapid of a pace for life. Any weaker, and matter would remain only in the form of the lightest elements. Either way, the elements crucial for life chemistry, such as carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, wouldn't exist. This force is finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 100th power. The force of gravity determines how hot the nuclear furnaces will burn at the cores of stars. If this force were slightly stronger, stars would burn too rapidly and too erratically for life. This is bad because a planet that is capable of sustaining life must have a planet that is both stable and long burning. On the other hand, if the force of gravity were slightly weaker, stars would never become hot enough to ignite nuclear fusion. Therefore, many of the elements required for life chemistry would never form. This is finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 36th power. In his book, The Case for a Creator, Lee Strobel says to imagine a ruler stretching from one end of the universe to another, and each inch on the ruler represents one of the power strengths that gravity could have fallen onto. If you were to move gravity over just 1 inch, life would be not possible. Now, I want to talk about two more examples of fine-tuning before we get into the syllogism. The fourth example is the electromagnetic force, the force of electromagnetism. In his book, The Creator and the Cosmos, astrophysicist Hugh Ross explains that, quote, if the electromagnetic force were significantly larger, atoms would hang on to electrons so tightly no sharing of electrons with other atoms would be possible. But if the electromagnetic force were significantly weaker, atoms would not hang on to electrons at all, and again, the sharing of electrons among atoms, which makes molecules possible, would not take place. If more than just a few molecules are to exist, the electromagnetic force must be delicately balanced, end quote. The force of electromagnetism needs to be just right to 1 part in 10 to the 40th power. Now, finally, the ratio of the number of electrons to the number of protons in the universe. This must be finely tuned. If we had too many electrons, electromagnetism would overpower gravity, which would prohibit the formation of galaxies, stars, and planets, because gravity is the force that brings together all of the gas and dust and matter in the universe and coalesce them into celestial bodies. Obviously, again, or if we had too many protons, electromagnetism would again dominate gravity, preventing the formation of galaxies, stars, and planets. You cannot have a universe with life that has no galaxies, no stars, and no planets whatsoever. The odds of this being finely tuned are 1 part in 10 to the 37th power. Again, quoting from his book, The Creator and the Cosmos, astrophysicist Hugh Ross says, quote, 1 part in 10 to the 37 is such an incredibly sensitive balance that it is hard to visualize. The following analogy might help. Cover the entire North American continent in dimes, all the way up to the moon, a height of about 239,000 miles. Next, pile dimes from here to the moon on a billion other continents the same size as North America. Paint one dime red and mix it into the billions of piles of dimes. Blindfold a friend and ask him to pick out one dime. The odds that he will pick the red dime are 1 in 10 to the 37th power. Good golly, Miss Molly, are these some fantastical odds? And I haven't even gotten into the entropy level of the early universe or the cosmological constant, which must be finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123, and 1 part in 10 to the 120th power, respectively. But in this TikTok, I don't have time to cover all of the examples of fine tuning, even the dozen that I cover in my book and blog articles. So we will move on to the syllogism and the defense of the premises. Now, everything that I have talked about in this TikTok is part of mainstream modern science. This is not creation science. This is not anything peculiar. This stuff is mainstream. And we have to ask the question, well, how do we best explain it? Well, there are 3 possibilities: physical necessity, chance, or design. Now, here's the argument for design that I've gotten from William Lane Craig's book, Reasonable Faith and On Guard. 1. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. 2. It is not due to physical necessity or chance. 3. Therefore, it is due to design. This is a logically valid syllogism. The conclusion follows from the premises due to the law of logic known as disjunctive syllogism. Now, are these premises true or are they false? Let's look at them. Premise 1 is indisputable. It's just a list of possible explanations as to how one might account for the fine-tuning of the universe. How can you object to a list? Now, if the skeptic can think of a 4th alternative, he's welcome to add it to the list, and then we can consider it when we come to premise 2. But these 3 are the only ones currently discussed in the scientific literature. What about premise 2, that it is not due to physical necessity or chance? What about physical necessity? Well, this alternative says that it is physically impossible for the constants and quantities of the universe to be any different than what they are. This alternative is not really defended by anyone that I know of, no physicist or astronomer or anyone interested in this topic. Surely the force of gravity or the strong nuclear force or the number of protons to neutrons, their ratio, could have been different. The universe could have expanded a little bit more quickly or a little bit more slowly. Any of these could have been different. And if they were different, then the universe would be life prohibiting. Well, what about chance? Well, again, look at the odds of, say, just the ratio of electrons to protons. If you were to, the illustration that I used from Hugh Ross's book was that if you were to stack a billion dimes, billions and billions of dimes across 1 billion continents, the size of North America, and you were to paint one dime red and mix it into all those dimes, 1 billion continents worth of dimes, and you had a blindfolded friend pick out one dime, the odds that he would pick out the red dime are the same odds that we would have the just right number of electrons to protons in the universe. This is fantastically improbable. These are mind-blowing odds, and they cannot be rationally faced. Now, there is, in fact, most atheists realize this, and that is why they opt for a very outlandish alternative that you've probably heard about if you are a science fiction fan. And I will talk about this alternative in another TikTok. But I think that both premises are true. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. It is not due to physical necessity or chance. Therefore, it is due to design. In the previous TikTok, I talked about the fine-tuning argument for God's existence. The laws and the constants of physics are very finely tuned to an extraordinarily precise degree to permit the existence of life. And in that previous video, we saw how just improbable it is that all of these, even the very few that I mentioned, should take just those precise values. Well, one very common way that atheists, scientists, and philosophers deal with this argument is to appeal to what is known as the multiverse, that there are an infinite number of universes in existence, of which ours is just one, and because there are so many universes, an infinite number, no matter how improbable it is that the universe should be fine tuned for life, there will be in the world ensemble at least one that has all of those just precise values by chance. But there are a few problems with this response. First problem, there's no evidence that a world ensemble even exists. No one knows if there are any other universes at all, much less an infinite number of them. You cannot see these other universes, you can't smell them, you can't taste them, you can't hear them, you can't detect radiation from them. There's no, like, Doctor Strange who can just open up a portal so we can jump into one and see what its contents are like. This is just pure speculation. I think it's ironic that atheists who constantly berate Christians for believing in things uh, against evidence or without evidence on blind faith would put blind faith in this infinite universe hypothesis. A second problem is that it explains too much. You could use it to explain literally any improbable event that you would normally infer as the result of a designer. Like all of the blog articles on my website, you could explain due to a cat and mouse running across a keyboard and just so happening to type the right keys in order to make coherent sentences. Well, why not? In an infinite universe, it's bound to be, one universe is bound to have a cat and mouse run across a keyboard and make coherent sentences. But no one ever accepts these kinds of explanations. A third problem is that it violates Occam's razor, a principle that suggests you should not multiply explanatory entities beyond what is necessary. In this case, you are appealing to an infinite number of universes as opposed to one intelligent designer. There are more issues with the multiverse hypothesis, but suffice it to say, it's not a good alternative to design. The fact that you talk about how big the universe is and how long that the universe we have been around leads me to think that you don't really understand the argument. That you think that if you just have I'm not arguing against evolution. Obviously, I think there's been plenty of time for evolution to occur by chance. The fine-tuning of the laws and constants of physics are put in at the very origin of the universe, at the Big Bang. The strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the force of gravity, the force of electromagnetism, the expansion rate of the universe in its earliest seconds. These are all things that have to be just right before anything can evolve. These are the preconditions for life that have to be just right at the origin of the universe. And the odds that these would fall within the range necessary is just fantastical. Let me just give you one additional example that I didn't give in my original fine-tuning video. This is from my book, The Case for the One True God, a scientific, philosophical, and historical case for the God of Christianity. It's about the entropy level of the early universe. It's finely tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. And here's what I write. That's 10 to the 123 zeros after the number 1. If you want to get an idea of how huge this number is, consider this. If you set a laptop computer in front of a 2-year-old toddler with Microsoft Word open, and you told him to put his finger on the 0 key until he had 10 to the 123 zeros typed after the number 1, how long would it take that child to type in 10 to the 123 zeros? He would die as an old man before he got finished typing in all the zeros. In fact, if you replaced the old man with another 2-year-old and told him to type in zeros in order to finish the work of his predecessor, he too would die as an old man before he got finished. In fact, you could go through 10 generations of men spending their entire lives typing in zeros, and they still wouldn't be able to type this number out in full. And then I go on to explain why this feature is so important, and I quote from Hugh Ross saying, quote, "If the rate of decay were any lower, galactic systems would trap radiation in such a manner that stars could not form. Starless galaxies would fill the universe. On the other hand, if the rate of decay were slightly higher, no galactic systems would form at all. In either case, there would be no terrestrial ball to serve as a home for life." And here's the citation for that in footnote number 14. You're kind of just proving my point that you are forced to explain anything and everything as a result of chance if you embrace the infinite world ensemble hypothesis as an alternative to design for the fine-tuning of the universe. Are you seriously going to tell me that you are legit entertaining the possibility that all of the comments on my TikTok were due to a cat and mouse running across a keyboard? Granted, a non-zero probability of that occurring and an infinite amount of chances across an infinite multiverse, it is bound to happen. But are you really going to bite that bullet rather than say, no, maybe we should reject this so that we don't destroy all grounds for rationality? Can you imagine this logic being applied in a court of law? Someone, yes, Your Honor, I know that it's highly, highly improbable for chance chemical formation to just so happen to form fingerprints on the murder weapon that killed the the murder victim, but you have to understand there's an infinite number of universes out there, and there's bound to be one of them where chance chemical formation does just happen to form fingerprints that just so closely match the fingerprint of my client. So, Your Honor, you should throw out this case. This all of the evidence that seems to point to my client being guilty, including the fingerprint evidence on the murder weapon, it's just a result of chance and luck. Because multiverse, that's why. In fact, you could say that at your local dealership, that every single car in the parking lot is due to a tornado striking a junkyard and tossing a bunch of mechanical parts together until they just so happen to form every single car at the dealership. That is statistically impossible. That's crazy unlikely. But hey, non-zero probability, infinite chances. It's bound to happen somewhere. And you have no grounds on which to deny these kinds of silly arguments if you embrace the infinite world ensemble. The price you pay for eliminating a design inference for the fine-tuning of the universe, you pay the price of being able to infer design anywhere else in the universe, anywhere else in the world, from cars to essays to toasters to houses. They could all be a result of chance because multiverse, that's why. I'm sorry, but for me, that's just too high of an intellectual price tag. I'm just not willing to pay that intellectual price. Well, of course not. If there is an infinite number of universes, an infinite world ensemble, that's the point. But the problem is that, I mean, if you're going to accept an infinite number of universes and you're going to accept the possibility of all these crazy improbable things, what you've really done is you've destroyed the basis for all rationality. Now, in my multiverse video, I alluded to what is called the invasion of the Baltimore brain. That was in a caption on the video. I didn't have time to address it. I'm standing outside of my dad's house right now, about to go in and have a meal with him, so I don't have my copy of Reasonable Faith on me, but so I can't read the quote from it. But I do remember the argument. And in that book, Dr. William Lane Craig says that the odds of molecules forming to form a single brain that observes an illusory universe is something like, I think, 1 part in 10 to the 84th power. And by contrast, the form of our solar system forming by a random collision of particles is 1 part in 10 to the 60th power. Now, given an infinite number of universes, there are bound to be universes where you have these brains, these Boltzmann brains, named after the physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, and they are going to be quite plenteous. In fact, you could be a Boltzmann brain, for all you know. I could be a Boltzmann brain. This phone that I'm recording on might not really be here. This comment might be a product of my imagination. This pine tree might not really be real. It might just be a figment of my imagination. In fact, I might be the only thing in all of existence, just imagining everything else. I could be a Boltzmann brain. And the thing about Boltzmann brains is that they wouldn't have to exist for very long. They could just fluctuate into existence for just a few seconds and have a past, false memories of, in my case, a 30-year lifespan, and then go out of existence. Not only that, but we should also have universes where things like horses pop into and go out of being due to a random fluctuation of particles, or where oxygen just happens to cluster together and then bullet into someone, causing an injury. This is what atheists are forced to. Now, given that we don't observe all of these crazy, improbable things, even in our own universe, which, why not? It would be probable. That makes it highly unlikely that there is a world ensemble. Some detractors of the fine-tuning argument for God's existence accuse it of committing a God of the gaps fallacy. You just appeal to God when you don't know how to explain some fact of science, some fact of nature. But is this really the case? First, I do think that some theistic arguments do commit God of the gaps fallacies, but I don't think this is one of them. Remember that the syllogism is as follows. 1. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. 2. It is not due to physical necessity or chance. 3. Therefore, it is due to design. The first premise just simply lists the possible explanations for why the universe could be finely tuned. And the second premise rules out physical necessity and chance, leaving design as the only explanation left. Chance and physical necessity are not good options. We've arrived at design by process of elimination. It has adequate explanatory power and scope. In his book Cold Case Christianity, J. Warner Wallace offers the following illustration. J. Warner Wallace presents us with the example of a man lying face down. There are 4 possible explanations as to why he is dead. He either died a natural death, an accidental death, he killed himself, or he was killed by someone else. Now, just having the fact that he is lying face down and he is dead is not going to give you enough data to arrive at which one of these is the correct explanation. But let's say we do have some more information. He's lying face down and he's in a pool of blood, and the blood is coming out of his abdomen. Well, that rules out natural death because people don't just naturally bleed out of their abdomen. He's not only bleeding out, but he has a knife in his back. Well, is this an accidental death? Well, what kind of accident would cause a person to back into a kitchen knife? But he doesn't just have one stab wound, he has multiple stab wounds. Now, what kind of accident or suicide, what if he wanted to kill himself, how would he be able to reach back there? I mean, maybe he could if he tried really hard and he was really flexible, but how reasonable is that option? It's not very reasonable that he was stabbed in the back and the front. So that rules out the suicide option. Well, homicide is the only one left. It looks like someone killed this man. Now, would you accuse detectives of committing the homicide of the gaps fallacy, that they're just inserting a murderer because they can't explain it any other way? That's absurd.